I'm Feroz, a quite long name, Abdul Rashid Feroz Khan, right? You can call me with any name of your flexibility, okay? And I'm a Microsoft MVP on Azure, and I'm the founder and CEO of Azure as well, based out of India and Middle East. I also work as a Azure Cloud Advocate, being a partner of Microsoft on app data center maintenance, app development, and data integrations for hybrid cloud as well. So that's about me. And before we get on to this discussion, I would like to thank our partners as well, who have made this event to be a huge success by supporting us, right? Well, so here we go with a quick agenda. We're going to speak about choosing a compute service, designing your VM solutions, when to stick on towards an app service if you're planning for a migration, and when to move on with functions, logic apps, containers that we have. Okay, so that's going to be the architectural discussion that we have. I'd like to hear from you, like, how many of you are architects here? How many of you are cloud architects here? Okay, can I keep the question one way the around? How many of you are Azure cloud architects here? One. How many of you are multi-cloud architects here? Two, three, slowly the hands up. All right. And how many of you are new to Microsoft Azure here? Oh, that's a quite good audience count. All right. Well, okay. See, this is not going to be a basic kind of discussion that we have or anything. It's going to be like an intermediate, I would say, right? And it's going to be a two-way of communication. Is that okay? So it's commonly a talk, right? And I want to stick towards this. Oh, what happened? Oops, it goes beyond. One moment. Vice versa. Okay. All right, there we go. Why Microsoft Azure? This was actually not on my plan, but I want to put this deck to keep a question to you people. Why Microsoft Azure? So the reason why I asked how many of your Azure cloud advocates is that this question is for them. Why you move towards Azure? Let's make it interactive, please. I hope I'm there with you all. Doesn't look like any Shreya Ghoshal singing here, right? Okay, cool. Why Microsoft Azure? Cheaper than? Okay, is there any Microsoft ESI team or partners here? No, right? So I can be transparent with you people. I would stand with the statement saying that Microsoft is not cheaper with any of the other CSPs that we have. Let's drop the ball that we have in the code saying that, hey, Azure costs you less compared to AWS or GCP. Not at all. It's all about the market play, right? AWS says that it's going to be like they give you 1 year free trial to try with their products, but it's not actually, right? You go to your EC2 instance, you try spinning up the EC2 instance, you could see like just a few size of machines that we have. Say, for example, it could be T2.micro or something, where they give you for a certain hours of time that you can spin up. It's not like for the entire 1 year that you can run it for free of cost as such. Right? And Azure tells you very transparently saying that it's going to be only 30 days of free trial that you can try, and it's going to be for open to all services that we have. Let's be much transparent, okay? It's going to be a common talk that we have. Azure is not cheap for you. Is that okay? Yeah? Well, any other reasons? Easy to use. Okay. We kids are always familiar, or we are familiar with our hands to be dirty with a Windows laptop in our life first, right? And we commonly stick to a mind saying that, yes, always, if it comes to Microsoft products, it's going to be a user-friendly one. And I agree with the statement, yes, Microsoft Azure is quite easy-friendly to use, but not that it's going to be much different or anything. If you're a guy who's going to be with the background of GCP or AWS that you speak about, it's going to be the same terminology and nomenclature that you're going to work here too. It might be related to the Cloud Shell, or it might be related to the commands that you run, right, or the containers that you're going to run. It's all same. You could be a multi-cloud architect just at a matter of seconds. It's not that finger crossed for you. Okay, but I agree with the statement. It's going to be easy to use. Let's speak from a technology point of view, right? Azure is going to be like a rock star who plays the market, who has more and more number of data center regions. You think about the regions where a corporate, a company which has been registered at US could not make business. countries like China, Russia, right? And still we have Azure data centers which have been deployed across China and Russia. You're getting it? So Azure is like one solid statement that we could say that we have more and more number of data center regions and we have more and more of open source support. Days have gone where we have been saying that, hey, I'm Microsoft, I'll be supporting only for .NET or only for Microsoft products. It's no more. We are now completely with open source too, right? And that's like one solid reason that we stick towards when someone says that I'm moving to Azure, definitely they are going to be an open source guy. How many of you are open source guys here? How many of you are cloud native developers here? Okay. And most probably you would be on open source. Am I right? Yes? So that's said to be like a solid statement where Microsoft came up saying that we love Linux, right? And here it's going to be like, we can speak about much and much more reasons, and Azure is going to be like one solid stand where we say that we will stick towards the open source integrations. We will speak about the more number of data center regions that we have, okay? And that's all about, okay? Costing, yes, it depends. Let's say that you're going to run some reserved instance or you're going to run some for example, it might be you plan to migrate your legacy or traditional applications from on-prem to cloud or anything, you can get a cost cut off there. But that's said to be a common factor which is there available with AWS or GCP that you speak about as well. Okay, let's be with a pointer of it's the number of data center regions that you say, it's going to be the number of the open source tools that has been integrated. Okay, that makes Azure to be more powerful, right? And here we go. The compute solutions on Azure, okay? Yes, here is exactly where, hey, what's that? Give me a second, it moves on like a couple or 3 slides more. Okay, this is said to be a solid architecture that we're gonna speak for next probably another 25 minutes if I have, okay? So we say that we are gonna move with an application, and the most common way that we stick towards is said to be like lift and shift that we used to do, right? It's going to be a common way of migration that we do, or we even say like we'll be doing an online migration or we'll be doing an offline migration that can come across, right? So here the pointer is that when you start with a migration, you first need to make sense whether you're going to build your new apps or you're going to come up with migrating the existing applications. Can you tell me few pointers which would be like finger crossed when you plan for a migration? What would be the very first thing that you would check when you move for a migration of let's say, of an application which is running some SQL Server 2005 or something? Compatibility, schema, okay. What else? Costing. Oh, who is the gentleman? Worries more than the customer. All right, solidly agreed. Yes, costing is like, though you handle your team even to learn Azure or something, when it comes to customer, right? Speaking about costing will take you from the pilot to the project, it takes like around 1 or 2 months of time. I agree with that. Yes, costing. Okay. What else? See, my kid wants to say something. Okay. Yeah. Performance. Yes, performance matters, but it depends on the size of the instance that we're going to spin up with, right? So it's completely upon you, and that falls with the costing part as well, right? What else? Availability. The availability of data center regions that we can speak about, the availability zone support that we get on the specific data center regions that you're planning for, what's going to be a RTO, what's going to be the RTO that Azure is going to support for us, right? This all makes to be much complicated checklist that you need to plan for when you move for a migration. So here when I say I'm going to migrate, I can say that I'll be moving with the lift and shift, right? And when we come up with lift and shift, you always have an option where you can say that you'll be moving for optimization with containers. How many of you are working with containers here? Cool. And what exactly on containers? Docker, Kubernetes? Which platform you belong to? Kubernetes. How many of your K8s here? 2, 3, okay. All right. Now, why K8s on Azure? Do you want to run your K8s on Azure or you want to run it on GCP itself? I hope I'm not singing. Yes? You're all there with me? Cool, okay. Why K8s on Azure? Why not? See, K8s is going to be from Google, and we can just probably move on with K8s to be running on Google data center itself, right? why we need to have K8s on Azure Cloud. Yes, please. Okay. Huh. Hmm. So you mean to say that connecting the dots would be much easier for you when you already have an application which is running on Microsoft Azure? Agreed. But I would simply say that when you have K8s on Azure, Microsoft was the very first guy who came into the market saying that there's no costing that we have for a master and slave nodes of configuration to be managed, right? You can even think about GCP, who came into the market saying that if you are going to maintain the control node and the data plane nodes that you have, the communication that it happens, there's going to be a separate cost that gets involved. And here, this guy came up saying that there's no costing that gets involved for it. Other than that, the size of the machines that we speak about. You might come across with a general purpose machine, or you might come across the data optimized machine that you're going to speak about. Or let's even say that you're looking for some high performance compute machines that you have, right? It all said to be available as a general availability almost on all data centers over here. You could even go on mind blowing when you think about like we have availability zone support even in India, right? So that's it to be like one thing. So if you're planning for containerization, and if your answer is yes, you can either go with AKS, or if you don't want the control node, or if you don't want to manage your infrastructure, let's say your VNet or anything, right? If you're just focusing on the development, you can always go on with the PaaS offering, which is said to be with app service. You have containers, which is said to be with the app service that's available. You can think about the Azure container instance that we have. Okay. And apart from that, we also have like you can always move your application towards the virtual machines, or you can always move your applications towards your, the Azure app service, a simple app service. You spin up an app service, you say it's going to be with Windows, or it's going to be with a Linux, and you can move your apps over there, right? And at top of these things, we also have the app service which supports with Linux, VM which supports with Linux, of course, containers which is born on open source, right? So this is a holistic plan which can say like when you need to move for each and every service when you plan for a migration. I'm going to speak in detail about each and every services that we have here. Okay, it's related to containers, or it's related to the virtual machines or anything. Okay. Well, virtual machines. When to stick on towards a VM? VM is going to be an infrastructure as a service that you get, and VM will help you a lot when you want to manage your virtual network, right? Swami was speaking about VNets, right? You plan to move your workloads from on-prem to Azure cloud or anything. You want to put up your own VNet. You don't want the other networks to get communicated with the virtual network that you're going to rely, right? Or you speak about the express route that we have been speaking about, right? You plan to do the migration, and once when it's migrated, you do the drill test and all these steps. You want to keep your virtual network to be dedicated for you alone, right? That's exactly where we stick on towards a virtual machine. You get the control of your VNet, you get the control of your network security group, where you can say what's going to be the incoming connections that can be allowed, or what could be the connections that can be denied, right? And the same for the outbound configurations too. You can also come up with your own image to be built, right? You can build your own image, you can put it on the Azure Marketplace, you can even ask your customers to use it, or you can even build your, your own team can use the image that you're going to come up with. This has been like quite older one, right? We are still with virtual machines. We still even have customers who are working with VMs, right? Moving from VMware or Wintel machines to Microsoft Azure or AWS, it's still there. But the trend has been moved where we are into containers now, right? We have started migrating the applications towards containerized environment. Okay, other than that, you can always go with running the legacy apps on a modern hardware. So Azure is going to provide you with a data center. Azure is going to provide you with the most powerful size of machines that we have. You can run your applications to be moved towards cloud, and it's Microsoft's responsibility to ensure that your application will be always up and available. Apart from that, we can access the third-party software. We have been speaking about Oracle, right? We have been speaking about OpenShift. We have been speaking about all the open source tools as well. So it might be any open source tools. You would have even seen that the previous couple of sessions back, we had Elastic that we have been speaking about, right? Any third-party tools that we have, it has been integrated into Azure Marketplace. You just go, you call it with the Marketplace, and keep your apps to be running on with Azure Data Center, right? And finally, controlling the compute environments. So it might be VNet, it might be network security group, it might be the disk that you're going to speak about, image of the machine, or it's even related to, you come up with a load balancer or, excuse me, you come up with a load balancer or you come up with a traffic manager, it's still easy for you to get it deployed, right? The next comes planning the virtual machine. So you start your migration here. Let's say you're going to build a new application, and if you need a full control of it, you move for the VM then, right? You might get the other question. Can I make it the other way around? Why virtual machines? Can I go with container instead of this? Will I be able to do that? Can I move for containers instead of a VM? Say let's make it simple. I'm planning for coming up with a new application and I need a full control of my infrastructure. Can I move for a container environment instead of a virtual machine? How many of you say yes for this? Okay, and how many of you say no for it? Unfortunately, your answer is wrong. You can move. You can move for services like AKS. We have Azure Kubernetes service, right? So if you need a full control over the infrastructure, you can go with AKS. You can put up, you can change the configurations that you need, the compute nodes that you need, the network options that you have, right? The virtual network options that you have. You can always stick towards the infra component that's said to be with the compute on containerization. Provider, when you speak about ACI, Azure Container Instance, or now we have just simply like a container instance which is said to be available. This will not let you to control the networking options that you have as such. Okay, so you might be right when you say that you no need to take the complete control of the infra or anything. You're just going to be a developer. You focus on the development. You move with the container instance there. Provided if you want to take a complete control over the infra, then you move towards your containers there. Okay, and this is for people who are just going to kickstart their career with VMs, right? For people who are opting towards the cloud as a new one. We then have lift and shift of applications. What's lift and shift? How many of you feel that lift and shift is said to be an easiest job that you can do? Yes? A bit higher on your hands, please. Yes, of course. Lift and shift is said to be an easiest migration that we can do. Okay, you do your assessment. It's going to be moreover like copying the existing infra that you have, you put it towards a cloud, right? Lift, shift, that's it. It's not going to be like you do any kind of, yes, you have schema updates. You need to work on the validations that you have in the schema. It might be your DACPAC file or anything, the log files that you come across, you need to do that. But still, it's going to be an easiest way that you can do. And you can always containerize your application, okay? And if you're containerizing it, you cannot use a VM. You need to go with the AKS or you will be going on with the ACI. Here, it's simply like you spin up a Windows server, you install IAS, or you put up a Linux machine, you put up Nginx on it, and get your applications to be moved. You're getting it? Yeah? So once again, the point is that if you want to manage your infrastructure, if you're not worried about the size of the application, agile, portability, then you can move for the VMs. I will not stick towards VM. How many of you feel, or how many of you prefer to stick on towards a virtual machine? Only one? And how many of you want to move for containers? All right, cool. And can I know the reason why we need to move for VM? Sorry? Do we have a mic? Makes sense, makes sense. So, okay, it's pretty simple. It feels like you have no idea about the container or anything. You want to make it simple, just same like how you have been managing it on-premise. You want to keep it on a cloud, then you move towards a VM. Okay, that's fine. But we have moved. VM costs you a lot. You worry a lot about the costing factors, right? VM will cost you a lot. Feel free to stick on towards containerization. Container is not like finger crossed. And you have DevOps. We have the next session where we are going to speak about DevOps as well, right? You have the automated CI and CD. You have the trigger builds on which you commit towards the container environment at any click. You don't need to worry about it. Well, so we then have this VM pricing, the costing guy who was speaking about. We have machines which goes with general purpose. We have compute optimized machines. We have high performance machines. So it completely depends upon the workload that you have on where you need to migrate your applications, right? And here is the other family of virtual machine that we have. We have a service also called as VM scale set. You can always plan your migration to come up with a VM scale set. So what exactly I need in a VM scale set? Let's say that you're going to plan your architecture from A to Z, right? You have an on-premise application and you're planning to move it towards a cloud environment that you have. You have to think about like whether you use a traffic manager or you use a load balancer, right? You also need to know about what kind of load balancer that you're going to use, right? And where to place the traffic manager, where to place the load balancer. You spin up the environment, you connect the dots with the virtual machine, right? So it's all like a tedious process that you have. And what in case if your application is something like you run a giant e-commerce applications or something where you want to spin up some 100 virtual machines at one time. It takes you a long time. Though you speak about your Terraform or you speak about ARM templates, right? It's still like it takes time for you. So I can always stick towards a VM scale set where when it comes to load balancer or traffic manager, managing the machines with the control nodes, it's all taken care by Microsoft. You just spin up the VM, put up a DNS name, develop your application, push the app towards a VM. So lift and shift, that's it. From your on-prem, you put on towards the cloud. You use tools like Azure Migrate, and then you come across, you do the drill test with ASR, right? You even keep a replica of the other data center regions to be always up. It's all going to be much simpler for you. We then have the Azure App Service. This is said to be a PaaS offering, right? It might be a very simple question, but still I want to keep it open to you. What is PaaS? I don't want to get the answer as platform as a service, right? I just want to know what PaaS is, how it's going to be different from the infra or the compute that we have been speaking about. Directly you get the platform. Okay, you just directly get the platform on which you want to push the application. Yes, that's going to be a way simpler way where you can do the migration towards a PaaS environment. Let's say, for example, I'm a code developer who is working on .NET or any environment that I have, and I don't want to move towards worrying about the infra or anything, right? I can stick towards a PaaS offering here. So Azure App Service, this again came up with a basic kickstart where you are not going to provision the infrastructure all. Instead of a VM, we can use an Azure App Service. Okay, you can say that you will be running your Windows apps or I mean your .NET apps or you can say your PHP apps, anything. You say you need a Windows machine or you need a Linux machine and you can deploy it. But what makes it the other way is that now they started supporting, it's not like now, it had been like 3 years now where they started supporting with a Docker environment too, right? You can go to the app service, you push your image towards your ACR. Have you heard about ACR? Azure Container Registry. Or you even say that you push your image towards a Docker hub, right? And you can keep it called over here in the app service. So the point is simple. You start your migration. If you're going to build a new one, if you want to take a full control, you will go with a VM, which we already discussed. And if you have no plan of controlling the infrastructure, you can always come up. You can even stick to the, you have the high performance compute workloads, like any ML workloads or anything. You can move on to a Azure batch. And finally, we have the microservice architecture. If you have no point of microservice or anything, you cannot move to Azure App Service, right? What you can do for a microservice? Have you heard about a service called Service Fabric? You have a service called Service Fabric on Azure. Okay, so that can help you out, right? And here the point is like you can containerize it, you migrate, you lift and shift, you can containerize your application, you can put it towards your Azure App Service. So this is said to be Docker environment that you have. You push the image and you can run your container instance then. What's going to be a downtime or what's going to be the reason that I cannot stick towards an Azure App Service? Any idea on that? Have you heard about something called as auto scaling? That's like one solid reason where we stick towards cloud, right? We no need to put up an infra guy or someone who has to take care of the metrics and keep the service to be up, right? We no need to worry about it. We can just say like you go with auto scaling and keep your metrics cracked and it can do an auto scaling performance based on the spikes that we used to get. It might be CPU or data in, data out, the request units that we have. So here, Microsoft Azure's container instance, which is said to be with app service, cannot work for auto scaling. Your web app can work. Your app service that comes just like a web app can work, provided your Docker or your, let's say, the container that you're going to put up with app service will not work for auto scaling, right? So that's said to be like a finger cross situation. Apart from that, we speak about the integrations that's said to be with GitHub. Okay, you want to call your applications from GitHub. You keep a staging environment to be available on GitHub or even in Microsoft, right? You can always do that. You can have deployment slots to come up with. You can stick on with a traffic manager. You can even come up with a private cloud environment to be put up with. So when you spin up with an app service, you have like, you have basic plans, you have standard, you have app service plans that are available. When you move on with an isolated app service plan, you can always go with even a private network to be deployed here. The next comparisons with container and VM. A very simple logic, let's say. What's the difference between a container and VM? I'm sorry? Isolation? What kind of isolation? You mean the package isolation that you have for the containers? You containerize the application and you keep it isolated. That's something that you're speaking about? Who is that? Who is that who said isolation? Hi, yeah. What kind of isolation you mean to say? Doesn't mean, let's make it interactive, please, yeah. Environment, okay. Environment, that's right. You can deploy even multi-containers and you can keep it isolated. I stand with that point. But what makes it hard is that, let's consider you come up with a virtual machine, right? You spin up a Windows Server VM or something. You could see that you have many application softwares that you come up with a Windows Server as well, right? That doesn't make sense at all. Why do we need application softwares to be put up on a server machine? I just need the Windows Server with IaaS. That's more than enough for me to run a .NET application, right? And when you speak about this migration, or when you speak about coming up with a secondary data center region to be deployed, it keeps you up to be with a higher in size as well, and the costing is going to be high for you, right? So to overcome these things, we came up with this container environment where instead of using Hyper-V, you come up with Docker Swarm engine, or you use a Kubernetes engine, or we have the other services as well, right? These two players are said to be rock stars with the market. So you can go with any of these people and you just take the image of what you want to come up with to host your application. And that makes it easy for you on Agile or portability that you speak about, or running even multi-containers apps to be available, right? So that's like one solid reason. And secondly, you can build your own image, right? You say Docker Compose and build your own image, push it towards a Docker Hub or push it towards ACR, and you can keep it always to be up then, right? Now, what makes harder here is that when you push your own image, it's your responsibility to take care of patching, right? When it's said to be with Windows Server, Microsoft comes into the place, Microsoft takes care of the patchwork that we have. I'm not speaking about app level of patching, I'm speaking about the OS level of patching, right? So it's the responsibility of Microsoft. Let's leave Linux, I'm speaking about Windows family, right? And when it comes to the image that you are going to compose, it's your responsibility that you play the role, right? So that's going to be the other stuff. And yes, so that's container and VM. Here is the container instance design. You can go to the container if you need a full-fledged orchestration. So who is going to play the orchestration role? Who will be playing the orchestrator role? It's not Hyper-V. Oh, you're like, oh, this guy keeps on asking so many questions after a lunch, right? Yeah? Kubernetes, yeah. Either a KX engine or you can say a Swarm engine can do that, right? So they play the orchestration and you keep your image to be up then. And instead of the ACI, okay, you can go with AKS here. Okay, the next deck which I'm going to show. So it does not take a full orchestration for you. They just give you the environment, right? And you're going to run your Docker over here. If you need a complete control over this orchestration or the infrastructure that you're going to speak about, then you need to stick towards AKS. You're getting me? This is a PaaS offering, right? The container instance that you say is said to be a PaaS offering. I stand with the statement of what one of our learner was saying about, right? He said that you will be provided with a platform, and you're going to just compose with an application to be pushed towards your platform that you have. You're not going to install .NET. You're not going to provide any SDKs to be come up with. No, nothing to worry. You just develop your application and keep it pushed. That's it. Orchestration, you're not going to control it. It's Microsoft who plays the role, right? And when to use container instance, yeah, it's fast and easy. It's going to be easy for portability. You want to plan with a migration, it makes you a much in cost cutoff, right? And you also have like a short-lived process. You can use the same of the AKS overflow that you have as well. The master and slave node configurations that you have, no, you can use the same. As I said, it does not scale. It does not have anything like auto scaling, okay? You need to keep a track of the metrics. You need to say like when you will be moving from standard to premium or anything. And it's not designed for microservice. K8, the most important part. K8 is going to be something where it can self-heal. Okay, it's the most used enterprise scalable environment that we have nowadays. It can provide you with a granular network control. Okay, you take the control of the network, load balancer. You say what kind of addressing has to be done. Okay, you also say like what image has to be used all. So that's all like which makes things to be much simple for you in a K8 environment. It's just same like the version that you have in Kubernetes with GCP. The same is set to be available with Microsoft Azure as well. So the reason is same, what we have been discussing before. The data center size, the count that we have, okay? This is all set to be the reason, and the costing, which is set to be the reason where we move towards AKS over Azure. If not, we can stick on towards EKS, or we can stick on towards a Kubernetes engine on GCP itself, okay? And I agree with the point, GCP is growing a bit at India, but comparatively, as of now, if you want to make your customer to be convinced with moving towards cloud, that too with the containerization, please stick on to Microsoft Azure, right? And yes, HTTP application routing, and you also have a private container registry support. Normally, what we used to do for the third party is that you can call the registry, which is set to be with their native stuff. Let's say if you're going to host an application with GCP, you need to keep your image to be available on the Google console itself. Right? Provided here, you can either keep it on Azure Container Registry, or you even keep it on Google Console, or you keep it on your Docker Hub, or any third-party repos as well. You can call the images to be running here, right? And here is set to be the highly available container solution. You have clusters that it comes across. You'll be having the same apps. It shares the storage as well, right? And it makes sure that the application is set to be always available for you. You will be having a processing engine, the content creation processing engine that we have, and there will be a data plane and the control node which is going to pass the information between the multiple cluster nodes that we're going to communicate with. Functions. What's a function? Do we have another 10 minutes or something? All right, cool. Don't worry, I'm at the last part of my deck. Serverless, exactly. So now again, I'm not going to worry about infrastructure or anything. I'm just a developer. I want to make the process to be triggered, right? It might be a HTTP trigger, or let's say that you want to come up with some files when it uploads to a blob storage or anything. You need to take an automated function for it. Okay, there we go with Azure Functions. So it's serverless. You just go on with the trigger. You just go on with the endpoint, right? It's an event-driven workload. Okay, so whenever there's set to be a metric or commit process that happens, it has to execute its action. So that's exactly where we move towards Azure Functions. Remember, Azure Functions is not like it can work at one stand. You connect your app service with Azure Functions, okay, or you connect with your container instance with Azure Functions, something like that. And this is similar to the other service. Oops, what happened? Oh no. Yes, this is similar to the functions that we have. You also have like logic apps, okay? And if you mean to say that you have functions to be connected with any databases like what we have been discussing before, it might be SQL or it might be NoSQL stores like Cosmos DB, you can still connect with the Azure Functions. You don't need to worry about the code. The template is given by default. It might be a Cosmos DB trigger, or it might be a HTTP trigger, storage trigger that you're going to come up with, or even like IoT solutions that you have. Still you can get the dots to be connected here. Okay, so lift and shift of migrations, connecting the dots with any PaaS offering that you need for an event-driven flow, then you can go with Azure Functions. Okay, so that's the complete architecture that we're going to come up with. So you say it's going to be a full control that you need, then you move with a VM. Or if you mean to say that I'll move with an advanced technology where I need a cost cutoff, I'll be having my own image to be available, then you can go with the AKS. You see the last one, you have AKS. So you get the control over here. Your VNet, your load balancer, all those things can also be managed. So the other way, you have high performance workloads, then you can go with Azure Batch, which can do a batch processing performance. And app service, you cannot run your microservice architectures. Instead, you just say like you need a platform, you want to host your application, lift and shift, host your applications to be there. Then you can go with the app service. Even driven flows, we have functions. Container instance, you're not going to get a full control over the orchestration, right? Again, the platform is ready available. You just push the image, you just push your application and to keep it, run it on. You go with the ACI. Service Fabric, I was speaking about the monolithic applications that we have, right? So to host all those things, you can go with Service Fabric. And finally, the AKS, which we already said. So this is said to be, let's say, a cheat sheet that we could say, right? Where we can plan for, if you're planning for any kind of migrations or anything, you can just think about what's going to be the expectation that we have from the on-prem environment. And so thank you so much.